Welcome to Pete's Deadhead Tech Studios. We just wanted to welcome everybody out to the show today. Howdy. I just wanted to let you know that we're going to have a very special guest today. So we're going to be having that special guest, and he's going to be his name is Sir Ken Robinson. Sir Ken Robinson. It's about his book called Creative Schools, the Grassroots Revolution that's transforming education. Education's important, y'all. I lied a little bit. It's going to be a woman, and it's going to be Kelly Miller. It's his assistant, though. So we're going to interview her, and it's about his book, though. And his book called Creative Schools. So to introduce this book and this wonderful woman, I'd like to show a video clip of Sir Ken Robinson. So it is called Do Schools Kill Creativity? And it is a TED Talk. And here is the clip.
But something strikes you when you move to America and when you travel around the world. Every education system on earth has the same hierarchy of subjects. Everyone, doesn't matter where you go. You think it would be otherwise, but it isn't. At the top are mathematics and languages, then the humanities, and at the bottom are the arts, everywhere on earth. And in pretty much every system, too, there's a hierarchy within the arts. Art and music are normally given a higher status in schools than drama and dance. There isn't an education system on the planet that teaches dance every day to children the way we teach them mathematics. Why? Why not? I think this is rather important. I think maths is very important, but so is dance. Children dance all the time if they're allowed to. We all do. We all have bodies, don't we? You know, did I miss a meeting? I think... Truthfully, what happens is, as children grow up, we start to educate them progressively from the waist up. And then we focus on their heads, and slightly to one side. If you were to visit education as an alien and say, what's it for, public education, I think you'd have to conclude, if you look at the output, who really succeeds by this? Who does everything they should? Who gets all the brownie points? Who are the winners? I think you'd have to conclude the whole purpose of public education throughout the world is to produce university professors. Isn't it? They're the people who come out the top. And I used to be one. So there. But...
Well, Kelly, we're here today, and I just want to say thank you, first off, for joining the show. I'd like to say that Kelly is not able to be in the studio today, so it's through phone interview. Just to let you know. And I'd like to also say, what specific topic is this, is the Creative Schools book about? Like Sir Ken Robinson, when he wrote it, what exactly was his point in writing it? Does he say something about that? Like his point. I appreciate if you could explain a little bit his background and why he wrote it what he wrote.
In his introduction for Creative Schools, Sir Ken Robinson writes, "In this book, I want to set out how the standards culture is harming students and schools, and to present a different way of thinking about education." So his topic overall is that a holistic approach to education is much better than a standards reform approach. And the whole purpose of him writing this book is to encourage change. He says explicitly in the introduction that he wants to show that whoever and wherever you are, you have the power to make the system change. And he's really aiming for all parties involved in education when he says he wants to give them the power to make a change. He lists students, educators, parents, administrators, and policymakers. He's looking at the whole picture and saying everybody can make a difference, but we need to take an approach that's looking at the whole child rather than its standards.
So you're saying a holistic approach, like the whole student, not just like a part of them? Okay. So, Kelly, what would you say his axe to grind is, or his, main thesis or thought is?
Robinson argues that people do not come in standard sizes and shapes, and nor do their abilities and personalities, so we need a radical change in how we think about school. He puts that thesis out in chapter 1, and he follows up with that thesis throughout the book. In chapter 2, he discusses how we need to change the metaphor that we use when thinking about schools and no longer think of schools as an industrial model, but instead think of them as complex, adaptive systems treated with the same principles we use when we think about organic farming. And when he suggests a radical change in chapter 1, he really means it. Later on in chapter 6, he says that we should maybe rethink what we're teaching and leave reading math, history, science, and move on to subjects like curiosity, creativity, criticism. He has 8 of them, and they all start with the letter C. So he's pretty consistent throughout his book in wanting to reevaluate how we think about school in pretty radical ways. And he definitely has an axe to grind. I think his axe probably says standards and testing on one side and industrial model on the other. Early on in his book, he says that teaching certain types of subjects and ability is impoverishing people's lives, which is a pretty big accusation. And later he writes that our preoccupation with standards is keeping students from realizing their full potential. He also questions the validity of our educational support industry, which prepares students for standardized tests. Because in 2013, the educational support industry grossed over $16 billion in profit, which is pretty significant. And he also likens our industrial model of education to the monocultures and industrial farms that are leaking pesticides into our rivers. So yeah, he's got a pretty big axe to grind.
What a mighty big axe he really does carry. The standard/testing on one side and the industrial on the other. I think I have to agree with you when you say a shift in the educational system. We need more diversity. I also agree that we don't all come in the same size and shape and sizes, as you can tell by looking at my face. I just also want to introduce Dead Tech Head Fred, and he has a question about your teacher, ELA teacher. How does it work there too?
We've spent this semester looking at how to teach concepts and processes and principles with the end goals of the learner in mind. This book aligns pretty closely with Dervin's work on sense-making theory, because that suggests that instead of organizations operating through the lens of their own assumptions, they should take first in mind the perspective of their audience. What is it that the audience needs? What is it that the audience wants? And in the same way, Creative Schools is urging its audience to move away from a prescribed, standards-based, and subject-based approach to looking at what real humans really need to reach their full potential. And regarding language arts, this has a lot of important points. Adam and I both teach language arts, and the shortcomings of standardized tests is especially relevant because so many of our students are frequently scoring below standard on CASP tests. I wonder if we looked at something like the learning record, which Ken Robinson advocates, which came before No Child Left Behind, and it started in London. It was used in California some, and that's something that takes a portfolio for student work so that parents and teachers can have a conversation about student progress that's just as important as what they're doing on standardized tests.
Yes, Callie. I have another question. What kind of material does Creative Schools present? Like biographical? What?
So as you read through Creative Schools, you get a feel for this pattern that Ken Robinson uses, where he uses inspiring stories from educators mixed with some research, blended in with some statistics, and it's a pretty substantial mix of touching stories, research, and quotes. For example, he uses biographical accounts of people who transformed schools, like Steve Reese, who founded